It's the month of June, and this month we also celebrate fathers. So we'll be having a sit down with Lupi Ngcayisa, who will be walking us through his journey of parenthood, fatherhood, and also how should we be better equipping or giving support to fathers during a time such as this in raising these very strong-willed modern children. Join us. Father's Day is a time to celebrate the father figures in our lives. And in as much as we go out of our way to pamper and spoil them, it's important that we continue having the dialogues that reflect how we can better instill values in the boy children. And in a continued effort to building a better society when we can also coexist, live authentic lives, and have generations that live a safe and free society. On today's The Sit Down Parenting, we are joined by veteran radio broadcaster, communications specialist, and brand strategist Lupi Ngcayisa as we discuss balancing and embracing modern-day parenting while confronting issues that persist in our society where fatherhood is concerned. We also discuss Lupi's personal struggles with bipolar and the impact of mental health on parenting and personal finances. Thank you so much for joining us, Lupi.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I so appreciate us having this conversation because it is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. In particular at this epoch, there's just so much going on around. The world has transformed quite drastically in recent months, and this also just warrants that we too transform how we do things and how we don't things. You know, there's a lot of unlearning to be made, and there's a lot of learning, tremendous learning to be made as well.
I want to start, let's go back. I mean, where you come from is so important to you, and it's also very important to us that have watched your journey, right? We have basically watched your journey with your mom, you know, God rest her soul. What a beautiful soul you introduced us to via social media.
Thank you.
And you talk about how growing up, she always kind of cushioned that idea of you guys growing up in poverty. She nestled that and didn't make it feel that way.
I still thank her for that because what it did, it allowed us not to then identify as poor kids. And as such, we operated on the basis of we're just the same as everybody else. I didn't know that I was poor up until I went to the former, well, it's sort of Model C schools, but we used to refer to them as white schools. And this is already when I was in, what standard 8? Grade 10.
Grade 10.
Yeah, it's only when you're in grade 10. And even then, it was when you see other blacks who are doing relatively well. Vukani Mde was there, and you know, mom was a teacher, and all of those kids whose parents were professionals. And then you're like, and then they talk about, you know, how cold their room was, or rather how they were not in a good mood when they got home, and they just banged the door and just remained in their room for the entire weekend. And you say to yourself, what, black kids have their own bedrooms? They can actually just like bang the door and chill in their own bedroom for the whole weekend. And that's when you start picking up. But mom did a great job in, love was in abundance at home. So as such, there was very little time to pay attention to the lack that was there materially and otherwise, and all the other comforts that come with when resources are there in a family. So never felt poor, never thought of myself as a poor person, never identified with poverty in that respect. As such, therefore, the dreams were always there, and they were nurtured because there was a mom who was a constant presence in all of that. There was a mom who was there to regale us with stories, and there was the mom who was just absolutely beautiful, who inspired beauty in everything because she valued beauty, she valued beautiful conversations, she valued beautiful people, she valued a beautiful life. So we just never felt it because it is not something that was communicated. And much as there was very little, but what was there, and what was there in abundance, which is what we all need, it was love, attention, affection. It was there.
Amazing.
It was there.
And you know, your mom would you say she played both the dual role of mom and dad?
Definitely. In fact, I was just thinking about how when I went home now recently and I was with my brothers, my remaining brother and sister, and my brother's like 60, I think he's about to turn 60 if he hasn't turned 60 already. It was the first time being with my brother and my sister post mom's passing, and I needed to understand what had transpired, but I'm not going to get into that conversation. What he said was so profound. He said, mom's loss is profound in many ways because mom was more than a woman. Mom was larger than most men. And that kind of like took me back, and then I realized, and hang on a minute, mom was that tough, you know, on the exterior when the circumstances warranted. So, and yet she was ever so gentle. She was more gentle, but there were times where she needed to be tough, or she needed to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Remember, you were raising kids, you know, in the 70s and 70s, 80s were quite rough in South Africa politically, with my brothers being involved in the struggle. So she had to be that. So she played that dual role incredibly well. She would give us unconditional love, but then there were times where her love was conditional as well.
Yes.
And when I look at how the normal traditional family, where there's a mom and a dad, more often than not, the mom, it's all about
the giver
absolutely, and all of that. So she kind of, you know, traversed those two worlds with such grace.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing the same now, you know, with in particular with my son.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask, like,
young.
how did that shape now your perception of what the father figure needs to be in the home, the perception of what a parent needs to be in the home?
A parent, you know, the best, if one were to say, how do you get closer to becoming the greatest dad or the greatest father? I think the benchmark is women. Mothers or women make the best fathers.
Oh, wow.
So if you module your style of parenting, in particular as a dad, and you use mothers or women as a benchmark, 70% of the battle is done, because women have this uncanny ability of parenting under the most trying of circumstances. They emerge victoriously, and it's just a matter of there's a sense of understanding that. It's understanding, it's instinct, it's gut, it's the gut feel, it's everything that just encompasses a woman, because women have this uncanny ability to nurture, to rear, and yet to instill discipline, and yet to be everything. And it's funny how even as young boys, most of us actually, even though not many would admit, but most of us, we're shaped by our moms.
Absolutely.
Or we're shaped by the women that raise us. It may not necessarily be your own biological mother, but there's a great influence, and it does shape us. It's only once we reach out to the streets, and then the streets start taking over.
And is this kind of like a reflection on just the femininity that we bring into parenting? Is this to say men need to embrace a lot more of the femininity that comes with parenting, rather than just relying on this masculinity and, you know, instilling this strength, and, you know, especially when you're raising boys don't cry, men don't cry.
Child rearing is a feminine endeavor, in that it is gentle, it warrants grace, it warrants softness, it warrants that tenderness. So you can't run away from it. And if you were to just do a desktop research and speak to people who have great relationships with their fathers, a lot of them will tell you that, you know, my dad was a gentle giant, my dad was like a nice teddy bear, my dad was so kind, my dad was so sweet. So how as society we arrived at a point where we chose to, you know, embrace masculinity as a discipline, or as an instrument by which we are going to now, or as a philosophy of life. I just don't understand it, given how tender and how fragile life is, and how life just really is out there for those who are willing to embrace it, but embracing it with grace and embracing it with the tenderness and the softness that it needs. I did mention earlier on that my mom would be aggressive when aggression was warranted, but then that would be once in a while. But it would seem as though now, as men, we operate from a place of aggression all the time.
Yeah.
And that's totally inhuman. No child is born aggressive.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you talk about like unlearning these things and relearning the ways of parenting that are progressive, you also talk about men need to remove, and let me quote you rather, you felt there is an appetite for men to go beyond what society deems as a role, and the responsibility of men so far as child rearing is concerned. And you mentioned that in this stage in our lives, this is where you feel men need to stand up and be a lot more responsible instead of just relying on this role and this title in how they raise children. You've said this before. Yep. But as a broadcaster, when you approach the way in which you parent, and when you also look at how men are generally parenting, what do you think is the real issue that is at the heart of it, considering the mood in our country right now, the issues we have?
I think it's just being stuck on I am a man and what that definition comes with it. I think that needs to be interrogated first and foremost. What is it when you say you're a man? Why is it that it is associated with you being a stone? Why can it not be you being a man, but yet you are a beautiful leaf, or you're a beautiful flower that just gets to bloom? Why must it be hard? Why must it be solid and unfeeling? Why must it be inconsiderate? Why must it be aggressive? Why must it be an imposing figure? Why can't it be embracing? Why can't it be willing to listen? Why can it not be tender? Because sadly, how you then identify as a father is how you identify as a man. So I think if we were to somewhat work towards identifying or rather defining exactly what it is, what is a man?
Yeah.
Because once we've gotten that right, then we would be able to then understand, or rather be better at being parents and at being partners and at being just normal humans. We would lessen the aggression, and we would, in times of conflict, we would violence and aggression therefore will not be our very first option, because we're not operating from a basis of I am a man and therefore, but I'm a man and I should at least reason, I should listen, I should think things through, I should process things through, and I should be guided by, kindness and grace in my actions. And only then, when a situation now really dictates that there be a level of force that's applied and even an attitude, then you'll take it there. But aggression and toxic masculinity should not be your first point of call in whenever you're interacting, be it with your children or the world as it is. Yeah,
and does this have to do with kind of not confronting certain mindsets, certain traumas that that a lot of men had growing up themselves? That's question number 1A and 1B. Yeah. That is also kind of a follow-up question, your vulnerability and also opening up about your struggles with bipolar. Are those things that it's kind of a hand that you stretch out to say, I've struggled with this, and this is how it's altered my way of parenting. And I'm so grateful that you trusted me with that, and you trusted me with your story.
Thank you.
To say, Olwethu, I struggled with bipolar, and it altered the way in which I parented. It altered it alters the person that you are. It alters the way in which you kind of you negotiate your way around the world. How not confronting those things are a hindrance to the way a lot of men parent, number one. And how was your struggle with dealing with bipolar as well?
I'm glad you mentioned the childhood trauma, because we're all struggling from childhood traumas. Those who came from wealthy homes, those who came from homes that were not, at pretty much cuts across. Everyone has some trauma of sorts that needs to be resolved. It's a lot easier for women because women have for the longest time cultivated the culture of sharing and expressing how they feel and their discomforts in a number of respects. But then again, with men, it's different socialization altogether. You know, you don't go around talking about your business. And in fact, because you are socialized to be this rock, this hard thing, even when you can't even identify your childhood traumas, because to you, life is meant to be this, and you are meant to be hard and just survive it and rise above without even internalizing it and processing it and realizing how it's actually impacting on you. So definitely, and for as long as we are not addressing those childhood traumas and addressing those insecurities and addressing whatever it is that is holding you back or that has actually turned you into this hard surface, we are going to continue having problems with fellow men out there. Bipolar, devastating. It's a devastating, in fact, most mental illnesses are destructive by nature, and in particular when they are not managed.
Yeah.
So the most important, yes, they'll always tell you step one is to admit. But what I've seen the most on social media platforms, it's people saying, you know, I have a mental illness, and everybody's accepting it, but not. I don't see much doing after that or attending to it. It's important for you to attend to it. It has impacted my life, finances. It does impact your finances because remember, this is a chemical imbalance, and you therefore just do things randomly without applying thoughts because you're operating from the two extremes. So when you are on the other extreme where life is all grand and life is all great and you just feel like a Putmadlisa of sorts and you swipe that card, you swipe, and someone comes with their problem. Before they even complete what they want, already there you are dispersing cash, or you're taking care of the expenses, you're taking that one to school, and you're paying for all of those things because you know you are in this high, and then the opposite happens. Then now you are in the deep, and now you've already committed to debts. You've overstretched yourself, so it impacts a whole lot of things. The most profound thing that has come out of my depression, though, and I appreciate it, it has made me a much more. My reserves for empathy are immense, and I love that because when you empathy, it's that one constant and that one sustenance that you need as a person, because if you are sensitive towards the plight of others, then you are in a position to be one with them in their struggles and in their happiness. It's made me a great dad in that I am alive to my son's or my children's emotional being, both of them. And I can connect with them at that deep emotional level. And that's one of the greatest things that I've actually, that I'm enjoying and that I'm grateful for my mental illness. So it's not all gloom and doom. And I'm not going to come here and say, you know, it's there, it is what it is. And you're living with it. It's not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's chronic. So you've got to somewhat at some stage find the positives within it. And the greatest positives is a positive that I've actually picked up out of it is that it has allowed me to feel. And nothing is as great as being able to feel. Because when you feel, you can easily step into someone else's shoes before you react. But what's important, and I cannot emphasize this enough, you've got to get treatment.
Yeah.
You just cannot just go in there and think you're just going to wing it. It has to be managed. It's brain chemicals. It's bigger than most of us. I don't care who you are, just go get treatment. Yes, treatment is difficult, Olwethu, because you struggle to get the correct, psychiatrists battle to get the correct concoction of drugs, because you can treat, you know, bipolar or depression, but then there's anxiety, then there's this and this and there's that.
Yeah.
It's quite a very long, draining exercise, but this is your engine. Without your brain, who are you? How are you going to impact the world if your brain is not fit? So you've got to prioritize it over everything else. You've got to prioritize it over the clothes you wear. You've got to prioritize it over the car you drive. You've got to prioritize it over everything else because it is that important. Once your mental state is at least, bordering on being healthy, it will never be 100%, by the way. You stand a better chance of drawing the best of what this life has to offer. And you stand a better chance of being this great person that you were born to be and that you're destined to be.
And how does, living with bipolar and being, a legend in your own right, but
so kind.
also
Thank
having to have had and lost friends such as Usis Brenda Fassie, along the way. And how has that impacted your mental health as well and your journey also as a parent in all of this? Death
is just that constant trigger. Definitely, there are just so many triggers. When you live with a mental illness, you sort of like, there's just this sea of, it's just landmines. You are bound to have a trigger. You're bound to have something that's going to have a devastating impact in your life. And remember, everything that happens to you, it happens at a large scale because you feel everything. You feel everything and you internalize everything. But with time, you learn to process those emotions and to work with those emotions. You turn to say, okay, cool, I know that this is, I love Brenda dearly. And it took years for me to actually respond and to react to her death. It's actually only now recently.
Yes, that you've actually experienced the profound loss before.
Absolutely.
I think you were numb to it.
I was very numb to it, yeah. So you go through those dips, but sadly, because of your mental illness, once again, everything in your world just seems to be a bit... It tends to be compounded, but it's not easy, as I've said. However, because life really, all our decisions are based on emotions, and as someone who then struggle with that aspect of one's life, at times you make really bad decisions, bad emotional decisions, and you don't respond appropriately or react appropriately to situations, but you have to learn to forgive yourself as well. And also not use that as an excuse, because people who suffer from mental illnesses can be devastatingly manipulative. And so you've got to also guard against that. But you learn to forgive and you learn to embrace life as is, and you embrace all these seasons and you embrace death because it is inevitable. And the sooner you make a peace with it, the better. It doesn't lessen the pain, or rather, neither does it reduce the loss, but you can manage the emotions far much better when it eventually hits. You are best prepared. So it's like having this cushion, so that because you know that winter is coming and you need winter clothing and you need to warm yourself up, but you just have to at times, and when disaster strikes or adversity strikes, and then you go back to your little corner and you try and draw comfort from there.
And what is your take on the huge void and gap of fatherlessness within the Black community as well? I think something you mentioned earlier is we need to also just kind of embrace the way women mother, in terms of the way that men need to father. Do you also feel as though, besides us needing to adapt to how women mother, there is that void that is just generally felt?
To the issue of the void, it will always be there. And to deal with this void, two culprits ought to be addressed. And we need to be deliberate in addressing these culprits. And culprit number one, it is men themselves. Culprit number two, it is society. Why society? Society has enabled these reckless behavior of men, of just being irresponsible and abandoning their offspring. It's been normalized for generations that a man would have a child and it's entirely up to him as to whether he takes care of that child or not. No one holds men responsible. As such, this behavior gets passed on from one generation to the other. So there is a need for, much as women, by the way, get held responsible when they are negligent with their children. So why can it not be the same with guys? So there's a concerted effort ought to be made that there is a child now that the two of you have brought into this life. It therefore cannot be right that the onus or the responsibility for the upbringing of this child lies on the one partner by virtue of how they are built physiologically and that they've given birth to the child, and therefore that assumption should not be made. And I think if families want to change, and if societies want to change, and if societies want to get men to account, then societies have to be the ones that, and families in particular, a family should not be comfortable knowing that their son has a child with so-and-so's daughter or with that person, and yet that child is not being supported. Men should not be comfortable, friends should not be comfortable having a deadbeat within their midst. That person must be an outcast. You cannot be having children and not support or maintain or make time for them and still enjoy all the other privileges that are being enjoyed by somebody else.
Absolutely.
So the responsibility, therefore, to hold, men accountable or absent fathers accountable, it should not just be the responsibility of the woman. The woman is playing a part, and everybody else must then play their part.
And no excuse should be enough.
No, not at all. And also, I think that the judicial system as well, it continues to fail women. I'm not even going to go on GBV, but I'm just talking strictly in this regard. So that needs to be tightened up as well. The state ought to say, no, this is just not going to happen. You're not going to get your full salary if you haven't done A, B, C, D, F. It has to get to that level, because clearly some of these guys are just hell-bent on their wayward ways insofar as being responsible for their kids are concerned. Then the state then needs to act, and it needs to act drastically, and it needs to act aggressively, because we're tired of this. We cannot be having these conversations all the time. Who do you think is taking care of your son or your daughter? Who do you think is there to tell them that they are loved when you choose not to be there? Or when you, and yes, there's circumstances, yes, there's money issues, people are losing jobs, granted, but nothing stops you from being there.
Just present.
But then back to society as well, a lot of guys would then argue that it's been structured such that the role of a man is to provide financially. Now, in these trying economic times, a lot of guys cannot provide financially, but
so
families must also then be embracing when a guy will just going to come and visit the child. Stop conditioning your children to believe that when daddy comes, daddy must come with 2 packets and daddy must provide this and this and this. That's social conditioning.
That starts the perception and it perpetuates the cycle.
Absolutely. So that too has to change, and parents must just be seen as providers of love, as providers of attention, as providers of affection. Everything else should come last. It should not be, my daddy is going to buy me this, my daddy is going to buy me this. What happens when he can't? And a lot of dads now can't. And I'm not by any means defending those useless deadbeats. No, I'm just talking about now genuine cases where a guy feels that he needs to withdraw because now the relationship between him and this child has always been based on, it hinges on his ability to provide materially for this child. It should be normalized that your dad is going to come and visit. He's going to come by a taxi and he's going to sit outside. You guys are going to kick the ball, or if it's whether you're a boy or girl, but you guys are going to sit and just have a little chat, and he's going to leave without having bought you anything.
And
but
that
he's
is
given
okay.
you the greatest gift, which is his time.
I think that is such a huge wake-up call also, I think, to us as women, to be open to that, to be open to kind of just reaching out and saying, umntana kufuna nje attention yakho.
No, and that's all they need, by the way.
Ube khona.
You buy that PlayStation.
I understand that iyanideka ubisi lomntana, but okwangoku.
No, just be there and be present. Don't just be there. Go pick him up and be with your friends and just let him tag along and not get their attention. No, kids want your attention. They want your attention. They want to feel that you are there. They need your presence. Not the gifts in terms of presents, but they want your presence. Be present. Be there. Even if it's just for 10 minutes, it means the world to them.
And I mean, we've seen your journey with raising Upalo. It's been absolutely beautiful watching this modern very bright child come to life.
He's incredibly smart.
He's just something else. And you also walked us through the journey of asking for permission from Usipho, Sipho Sethu.
Snesipho, yeah.
Usnesipho, yes. Usnesipho to have a second child.
Yeah, it's important.
So how did that go? How did that happen?
I think we've always, because Nesipho was the only child for the longest time, but it's something we've always spoken about because she was very clear that she ain't having any children anytime soon. and I've always, because I never got to raise my daughter. I was incredibly young, and I've always wanted to give what my mother had given to me. To another human. I've always wanted to pass that on because I've loved how she has reared us. Yes. And it was such an integral part of my life, and I needed that transfer of love being channeled in that fashion. So it was not really a difficult decision per se. It's something that we've always spoken about. But why was it important for me to get permission for my daughter? It's because I think we take children for granted, and I believe that as parents we are consummate bullies. We bully our way around. We don't take into consideration the feelings of children and how they feel about certain things. You guys have set yourselves up that you want to have 4 children, but you don't necessarily engage or consult.
Would you guys like another sibling?
Absolutely, and it's only after the effect. Then this poor child now is forced to
get along with another
and
human.
Embrace what is here. Whereas I'm very big on, just generally, I'm the kind of person that I'm very big on, I consult. I don't just make decisions. I consult with my son what he wants to eat. In fact, I consult with him on pretty much everything. I don't
think he'll let you not consult.
No, definitely not, because he'll tell you that. But I mean, I was never a part of this. But it's something I've also inculcated in him from when he was young. So it's such an empowering tool in my world where you can't be talking about your voice must be heard when you did not even teach me how to have my own voice when I was young and when it mattered the most.
And I want to ask you, what have you then noticed in terms of her development as well, and her personal development in being asked about certain journeys that you go into and being consulted on those journeys? What has her personal development been like?
I watch her, it's an absolute marvel watching this woman that she's developing into and being her own person, making her own decisions. And she has no interest in even leveraging on whatever it is that I think I've built, and it's not from a negative place, but it's just that I've got what it takes, to create my own person. So she's become fiercely independent, and it's great. And she stands her ground. We're all working from home now. There are instances where she's in a meeting at work, and I hear her, asserting herself over certain things. And I eavesdrop, and I say, "This is it. That's exactly
that's my girl.
That's exactly what we want." And how you are in relationship with friends or whatever, you realize that this friendship, even though it has sustained for this long, but it's now becoming toxic, and how she removes herself, how certain family members, she distances herself. But it's because I guess she's always had a sense of, she discovered her sense of worth from a very young age. And her being and her comforts have always been prioritized for her, and as such, then that transcends in how you engage and interact with the rest of the world and your immediate world and the world as a whole. So I'm very happy, and I'm beginning to see it now playing itself out now, even with Phalo.
Yeah.
It's a marvel to watch how Phalo, for example, asserts himself and how considerate he is, but how he protects his heart. So I will ask, how come you never talk about so-and-so anymore? And he'll say, no, so-and-so was a good friend, but I don't like how so-and-so treats those other guys. He's aggressive, and we told him to stop being aggressive, and the teacher has spoken about it, but he doesn't listen, so I'm not going to have an aggressive friend. And it's beautiful, because it takes me back to me. I have fallen out, not necessarily fallen out, but I've chosen not to interact or engage with certain people because of how they behave towards others. Yes, you are kind to me. Yes, you are great. But the moment I start seeing you dehumanizing others, or I start seeing you ill-treating others, be they waiters and restaurants or petrol attendants, or your employees or whomever, I disengage. I choose not to visit people's homes because I just don't like how certain people whom I've held with such high regard, how they treat their domestics. And I've chosen not to engage with certain guys because I just don't enjoy how they treat the women that they have children with, or how they treat their children and all of that. So I see a lot of myself and my kids in that we've mastered the art of protecting our safe spaces and not allowing anything that is to the contrary. And I'm glad that the sixth soon to be turning 7 is also learning on that, where if it doesn't sit well with my ideals, and if I feel that you're great to me but you're aggressive there and you're nasty there, then you're not going to
then
be
it doesn't
my
work
friend.
for my space.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's the attitude, back to what you had asked me earlier on, that as guys, as men, as fathers, as dads, we should all adopt that. If so happens to be a deadbeat and we've set him down over his behavior and he's not prepared to change, then he should not be accepted in the circle. I don't understand how, where is your consciousness, your conscience when you continue befriending Utabo, whom you know Tabo's kids are struggling, and Tabo is a constant and a consistent inconvenience and source of pain. And I don't want,
and we shouldn't also make it easy for men either. This is not to say you remove yourself because Utabo is a deadbeat. You call it out.
No, you've got to
call it out first.
And you've got to call it out, and you've got to be consistent at it. There's calling it out for the sake of calling it out, but then you've got to call it out and act
and act accordingly. Yes.
And of course, there's another conversation. I mean, that, and I know we don't have time, but also women should, those few, by the way, they are minuscule. Because it always comes up when this conversation comes up. Let's navigate this co-parenting thing with the dignity, and not use the children as pawns to our own battles and own struggles, because at the end of the day, it is the kids who suffer.
Absolutely. They say when 2 elephants fight, it is not them that get hurt, but the ground that they fight on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You have a hectic schedule, work schedule. Yeah. Your home work life is hectic.
Yeah, and I've never had a nanny, and we don't have help.
So how do you navigate that? Because I've got a nanny.
No, but it goes back to what I said to you, that my mom did it without these resources, and then so can I. And at least financially, I'm in a much better position than she is. So I can buy certain things, or at least I've advanced in life such that I do have the liberty of time, and she never did. But you structure your life. I mean, I still take my son to school, and 98.9% I collect my son from school. It means a lot to me. He loves me preparing him for school, because it sets his day on a jovial tone. That's the energy that I bring. And it actually, as someone who struggles with depression, there are moments where I'm just like on a dip, but then he has a way of yanking me out of it because of his energy. So I think it's therapeutic. And it's fun and it's great, because I'm not always going to have that energy. There'll come a time in my life where, health will not allow, or I don't know what's going to happen. He might choose to go to boarding school. But so right now I'm just taking it in as much as I can. But each act that I give and everything that I do for him and for the family, it's just an extension of love, and it's just a way how your love gets to manifest, and love at times manifests through service. Yeah. So being of service to my children and being of service to my job, I take my job very seriously. And everything that I attach my name to, by the way, it's because I'm just giving you a piece of me, and that's the greatest gift I can give you. Yeah. And therefore it has to be refined, it has to be polished, it has to be beautiful, it has to be sparkling, because it is the best of who I am.
Absolutely.
And that's all I've ever known, to give the best of who I am wherever I am. And the best of who I am, it's commitment, it's kindness, it's love, it's grace. So that's why I prefer doing things this way. It gets taxing on the body, because I mean there are those moments where, especially if the night before, that is, I'm thinking,
and they know how to how to knock on the door on those days.
Absolutely. I mean, he would even look me in the face and say, "Your face doesn't look pretty. What did you drink last night?" But it's okay. But even that, it also pushes you now to get harder and not be punished by your deeds of the night before, because life must happen.
As you're going in the night before, you're like, it's in more water.
No, definitely.
Because it's gonna
So it
get
helps
real.
to regulate you as
Yes.
well. It helps to regulate you as well.
So what are you busy with? What are you working on?
Well, I am considering a show of this nature, just having conversations with people. And I'm just looking at your team now and I'm thinking, perhaps maybe I'm going to be knocking here and saying, guys, can you also help me? I want to have conversations and I want to get into documentary filmmaking. I love telling stories and I've been privileged to have been invited into people's homes
And you're an amazing
lives
storyteller.
and people who are just incredible, whose stories are yet to be told, and some people are famous and some are not. So I definitely want to get into that space, and I think I see myself retiring doing that, and I'd love to travel the world with my son as we are covering all these stories. But I think as a good starting point, I am definitely looking at something like this. I love the team that you're working with. I love the vibe here. I love the energy here. So I think I'm going to send an email. Please, what do you guys say now? Please plug me in. But
please plug me.
Yeah. But I'm also continuing with my job. At the moment, I'm still, serving for the state, and I love that. It's a great privilege. Yes. And but I definitely, if one were to talk about an exit strategy, and I think probably in a year or two or so, that's what I'm going to be doing, documentary filmmaking. But at the moment, I am, putting a team together that's going to help me have these kinds of conversations with people.
Amazing. I look forward to that because you're an amazing storyteller. Thank you. You're one of the best to do it in our country, to tell stories through our lens, through the reality of how we live in this country. I truly appreciate you giving me your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate that so much.
Thank you for inviting this geriatric. And thanks to your team for making me look pretty.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Sit Down Parenting with Lupi Ngcayisa. What an amazing session of learning just about this human who's all about love, humility, and service. Until next time.